Welcome back to Interpretations. I'm Owen Gray. In this series, we are taking a critical and historical look at the first chapter of Ralph Ellison's 1952 novel Invisible Man, looking at the text and the subtext. This is the fifth part in a six-part series. If you haven't seen the previous parts, please take a look here for a playlist. I'd especially encourage you to go back and watch part 2. I see a lot of correspondences between how the white men treat the white woman who represents the American dream and how they treat the black teenagers in this section. In the previous section, the title match, we watched as the narrator was left alone in the ring with the biggest of the other black teenagers to fight it out for the sick entertainment of the white folk. In this next section, the rewards, we'll see how the white men treat the black teenagers now that the entertainment is over. Content warnings for this section include anti-black racism and some strong language. With those remarks out of the way, let's get back into the novel. Then the MC called to us. "Come on up here, boys, and get your money!" We ran forward to where the men laughed and talked in their chairs, waiting. Everyone seemed friendly now. When we get to this point in the text, I wonder why the white men seem friendly now. Is it because their desire for entertainment has been satisfied, the way fans of opposing teams can sometimes talk and socialize after a good game? Or is it because their place in the racial hierarchy has been confirmed and reaffirmed by watching the black teenagers fight one another? It could be one, it could be the other, it could be both, or it could even be something else. "There it is on the rug," the man said. I saw the rug covered with coins of all dimensions and a few crumpled bills. But what excited me, scattered here and there, were the gold pieces. I wonder if the gold pieces here are a trap. How are the black teenagers going to spend them? Would stores accept them as if they were cash? Would banks accept them? I don't know if Ellison intends it, but I'm reminded here of a scene from The Jungle by Upton Sinclair. The protagonist, Jurgis, receives a $100 bill while begging. He goes to a bar and asks the bartender to change it into smaller bills. The bartender agrees on the condition that Jurgis buys a beer, and of course Jurgis agrees. The bartender pours the beer and then gives him the change as if he had only given the bartender a $1 bill. When Jurgis asks for the other $99, the bartender calls him crazy, and a fight ensues. Ultimately, Jurgis gets arrested and has to go before a magistrate, and the magistrate believes that he was drunk and incoherent, and I wonder if this is another trap that the white men are setting for the black teenagers, that if the narrator actually does get the gold coins, if he'll be able to spend them. "Boys, it's all yours," the man said. "You get all you grab." "That's right, Sambo," a blonde man said, winking at me confidentially. I trembled with excitement, forgetting my pain. I would get the gold and the bills, I thought. I would use both hands. I'd throw my body against the boys nearest me to block them from the gold. "Get down on the rug now," the man commanded. "And don't anyone touch it until I give the signal." "This ought to be good," I heard. This line always gives me pause. I have two thoughts. First, what's going to happen next? And second, this next section could explain why the men are acting friendly. This is yet another setup for yet another trap that the black teenagers face. As told, we got around the square rug on our knees. Slowly the man raised his freckled hand as we followed it upward with our eyes. I heard, "These look like they're about to pray." I've always wondered if this section is a reference to Islam. I'm not particularly religious, so I don't know if it's common to kneel to pray. I also am not an expert on Southern religion, so I don't know how common kneeling is in Southern Christianity. Also, I think it's ironic that it's one of the white men in power who says this. Some people say greed or capitalism is American religion, so the fact that the white men conflate money with religion reveals to me more about the speaker and his view than it does about the black teenagers. Then, "Ready," the man said. "Go!" I lunged for a yellow coin lying on the blue design of the carpet, touching it and sending a surprised shriek to join those rising around me. I tried frantically to remove my hand, but could not let go. A hot, violent force tore through my body, shaking me like a wet rat. The rug was electrified. Now, I can't exactly remember the context in which I learned this, and it may be apocryphal for all I know, but somewhere I remember hearing that strong electric fields can sort of override the nervous system of the human body. So if you want to see if a fence is electrified, you should actually put the back of your hand toward the fence. Because if it is electrified, your hand may close involuntarily, and you may end up grabbing the fence. Reading this again, the fact that the narrator says that he cannot remove his hand makes me wonder if the electric fence explanation is true. The hair bristled up on my head as I shook myself free. My muscles jumped, my nerves jangled, writhed. But I saw that this was not stopping the other boys. Laughing in fear and embarrassment, some were holding back and scooping up the coins knocked off by the painful contortions of the others. The men roared above us as we struggled.
"Pick it up, goddammit! Pick it up!"
Someone called like a bass-voiced parrot.
"Go on! Get it!"
I crawled rapidly around the floor, picking up the coins, trying to avoid the coppers and get greenbacks and the gold. Ignoring the shock by laughing, as I brushed the coins off quickly, I discovered that I could contain the electricity. A contradiction, but it works. Then the man began to push us onto the rug. Laughing embarrassedly, we struggled out of their hands and kept after the coins. We were all wet and slippery and hard to hold. Suddenly, I saw a boy lifted into the air, glistening with sweat like a circus seal, and dropped, his wet back landing flush upon the charged rug. Heard him yell and saw him literally dance upon his back, his elbows beating a frenzied tattoo upon the floor, his muscles twitching like the flesh of a horse stung by many flies. When he finally rolled off, his face was gray, and no one stopped him when he ran from the floor amid booming laughter. The teenager getting picked up and dropped onto the electrified rug recalls the woman who symbolized the spirit of white America or the white American dream, who was picked up by the white men as though in a hazing ritual. The use of the word circus in particular draws my attention because the woman was described as having hair as yellow as a circus Cupid doll. In fact, the word circus is used 3 times over the course of this chapter, and it makes me think about the phrase bread and circuses, which has its origin in ancient Rome, about appeasing unrest superficially rather than doing the hard work of reform or abolition. This money might help the boys in the moment, but ultimately the oppressive systems of Jim Crow laws, racism, and capitalism will remain in effect. "Get the money!" the MC called. "That's good hard American cash!" And we snatched and grabbed. I was careful not to come too close to the rug now, and when I felt the hot whiskey breath descend upon me like a cloud of foul air, I reached out and grabbed the leg of a chair. The hot whiskey breath here is coming from the men who are planning to throw the narrator onto the electrified rug, just as they had thrown the other black teenager. Does every teenager get hazed this way? Is every teenager threatened with being thrown on the rug, or are they picking and choosing which teenager gets thrown? It was occupied, and I held on desperately. "Leggo! Leggo!" The huge face wavered down to mine as he tried to push me free, but my body was slippery, and he was too drunk. It was Mr. Colcord, who owned a chain of movie houses and entertainment palaces. Every time I read this, I'm curious why the words entertainment palaces are in scare quotes. It must be that what they are called does not accurately reflect what's going on inside of them. I wonder if they might be illegal casinos or illegal brothels. Also, this is another man that's named. He's the 3rd person who's named in the chapter. Colcord does not have resonance for me that Jackson does. It does make me stop and wonder if there's something here that I'm missing, and if better knowledge of American history or the South would make this passage and this name clearer. Each time he grabbed me, I slipped out of his hands. It became a real struggle. I feared the rug more than I did the drunk, so I held on, surprising myself for a moment by trying to topple him upon the rug. It was such an enormous idea that I found myself actually carrying it out. I tried not to be obvious, yet when I grabbed his leg, trying to tumble him out of the chair, he raised up, roaring with laughter and, looking at me with soberness dead in the eye, kicked me viciously in the chest. The chair leg flew out of my hand, and I felt myself going and rolled. It was as though I had rolled through a bed of hot coals. It seemed a whole century would pass before I would roll free. a century in which I was seared through the deepest levels of my body to the fearful breath within me, and the breath seared and heated to the point of explosion. It'll all be over in a flash, I thought as I rolled clear. It'll all be over in a flash. This section here seems to have a greater subtext than what is actually on the page. I think that Ellison is being symbolic here. This idea of black people facing another, quote, century before they would roll free seems sadly prophetic. Remember, Ellison was writing this in the mid-1940s, and here we are in 2020, almost some 80 years later, still fighting civil rights battles and still fighting anti-black racism and white supremacy. I wish that Ellison's words here did not seem so prophetic. The second part here about the narrator's breath being heated, quote, to the point of explosion, recalls for me Langston Hughes' famous poem Harlem, more often referred to by its first line, What Happens to a Dream Deferred. Ellison probably did not know about that poem at the time he was writing this chapter. It was first published in book form in 1951 as part of Montage of a Dream Deferred, though it's possible that it might have been published separately in a magazine before that, just as Chapter 1 was published separately as Battle Royal 5 years before the book. But not yet. The men on each side were waiting, red faces swollen as though from apoplexy, as they bent forward in their chairs. Seeing their fingers coming toward me, I rolled away as a fumbled football rolls off the receiver's fingertips back into the coals. That time, I luckily sent the rug sliding out of place and heard the coins ringing against the floor, and the boys scuffling to pick them up, and the MC calling, "All right, boys, that's all. Go get dressed and get your money." I was limp as a dish rag. My back felt as though it had been beaten with wires. When we had dressed, the MC came in and gave us each $5, except Tatlock, who got 10 for being last in the ring. Then he told us to leave. I was not to get a chance to deliver my speech, I thought. If we pause here before we read the last two sentences on this page, I wonder if the narrator is starting to realize his place in the racial hierarchy yet. It seems like he doesn't fully understand what being a second or even third-class citizen means in America in real terms. They have, in all practical terms, forgotten about his intelligence and the ostensible reason why they invited him to participate. If we stop right here, there are a few places our thinking can go. First, and most charitably, we could think that the MC simply made a mistake. Perhaps he forgot that the speech was on the program, or he thought that he had told the narrator to stay when he dismissed the other black teenagers. We could also think this is another cruel trick of the white men. They made the narrator fight, made him think that he wouldn't get a chance to give his speech just to watch his heart sink, and then invite him to give the speech after all the time enjoying how his emotions are twisted. The final interpretation, if we had stopped here, is that the white men had never intended to listen to the narrator's speech, that they had invited him under false pretenses, though if you're reading on the screen, you might notice that this line of thinking is immediately contradicted in the next sentence. I was going out into the dim alley in despair when I was stopped and told to go back. I returned to the ballroom, where the men were pushing back their chairs and gathering in groups to talk. And that's the end of Part 5, The Rewards. Thank you so much for watching. Join me next week when we finish the series with the part that I call The Speech and the Dream. If you liked this video, please go ahead and give it a like. If you didn't like it, go ahead and give it a dislike. I look forward to having a conversation with you in the comments below where you can add your own interpretations. If you found this video informative, I would appreciate it very much if you shared it on social media. If you really like the work that I'm doing and want to support me financially, you can support me over at Patreon at patreon.com/OwenXGray. You can also follow me on Twitter at twitter.com/OwenXGray or on Facebook at facebook.com/OwenXGray. Again, join me next week for the final part in this series, and until then, keep interpreting.